I'm Dale Smith for Looney Politics, and because it's wildfire season once again, we're getting the same calls to create some kind of a national coordinating body for fire or wildfire firefighting. But also sometimes that gets wrapped in with calls for a more broad civilian disaster or emergency management agency federally, kind of like an American FEMA. But the problem is that this is generally provincial jurisdiction in this country. And also, we already have a national coordinating body for forest fires called the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre. And that's a not-for-profit that is owned by all three levels of government that does the work of coordinating resources and human resources and training for fighting wildfires across the country. So we already have a body. We don't need the federal government to stand up a new one that would be intruding on provincial jurisdiction. This does, however, raise the broader point about how this has been managed in the country in terms of provinces underfunding their own emergency and disaster relief functions. Now, the federal government, when it comes to emergency management or disaster relief, is generally one that comes to the table with money in the aftermath of a disaster, and if it reaches a certain threshold, then the federal government chips in a whole bunch of money, and because we are in the age of a climate emergency, that threshold gets reached pretty quickly most of the time. However, there's been a problem where provinces have learned that they can underfund their disaster management or their emergency management because they can call on the Canadian Forces when they need it. And they've been calling on that backstop a whole lot more because we've learned to incentivize that. What I mean by this is that by underfunding their own domestic or provincial emergency management services and calling on the Canadian Forces, they're essentially getting the Canadian Forces for free. Now, the federal government could, if they really wanted to, engage in cost recovery and charge the provinces for the use of the Canadian Forces, because it does cost money, and there is an opportunity cost as well, because they should be spending their time doing things like training for deployments. So when they're doing provincial emergency management, they're decreasing their operational readiness for the country at a time when we might actually need it. Now, like I said, the federal government could engage in cost recovery, but the problem is that's terrible PR. It would end up in the media as, how dare the federal government charge the provinces in their time of need, but we never actually say, why are the provinces underfunding their emergency management systems, when that's the real question and where the accountability should lie. Again, it's all well and good to talk about having a federal civilian disaster management agency, but that would require provincial cooperation. And I think the first step here is to actually hold the provinces to account for their current underfunding. For Looney Politics, I'm Dale Smith.